Walk into almost any forest in North America and you'll find tracks, feathers, droppings, and nests. You'll almost never find a body. The usual explanation is decomposition, which sounds reasonable until you look at how long decomposition actually takes. What nobody mentions is that rot is rarely what gets there first. In controlled trials, scientists laid out bird carcasses under cameras and watched roughly half of them disappear inside 24 hours. They hadn't decayed. They'd been carried away by something that was already waiting, and it found them long before the flies did. Central Spain, 2010. A team of researchers spread 522 dead birds across open cereal farmland underneath a run of overhead electrical cables. The goal was straightforward enough. Birds collide with power lines constantly, and conservation groups wanted to know how many were actually dying. The only way to count the dead is to walk the ground and pick them up. So the team wanted to know how much of the evidence was still there by the time anyone arrived to look. They searched the same ground 4 times over the following month. Within the first 2 days, nearly a third of the birds were gone. After that, the losses slowed down in a smooth curve, and by the 28th day, the disappearance rate had dropped to about 1.5% per day. The small birds went first and went fastest. The large ones lingered. Every single count taken at those power lines had been undercounting the dead, and the researchers could finally say by how much. That study is one of dozens, and they all find the same thing from different angles. Camera traps set up around dead birds in Eastern Europe caught 6 different species doing the removals. Stone martins accounted for the largest share, followed by common buzzards, magpies, domestic cats, hedgehogs, and red foxes. The birds worked at dawn and dusk. The mammals worked overnight. Between them, they covered nearly every hour of the day, and the average carcass lasted about 45 hours before something claimed it. I mean, think about that for a second. There's a shift rotation operating in the woods behind your house, and it has better coverage than most hospitals. The scale of this research has grown fast, mostly because wind energy forced the issue. The largest analysis of its kind assembled more than 11,000 carcass persistence records drawn from over 600 wind farms across France, all of it gathered for one purpose. Nobody can estimate what a turbine kills without first estimating what the foxes took. Pay attention to this next detail because it explains a lot of what you see and don't see on a walk. The season changes everything. British researchers ran the same carcass trial twice on the same farmland, once in winter and once in summer. In winter, only 6% of the bodies were gone after 24 hours and 32% after 4 days. In summer, 76% were gone within 24 hours and 91% within 4 days. Same fields, same scavengers, same species of bird. The difference is that cold slows the crew down and warmth speeds it up. And warmth also brings in the insects that make a body easier to find by smell. Which species you happen to be also matters more than you'd expect. One study set out carcasses from 5 different bird species at simulated wind turbine sites and tracked them over 2-week rounds. Scavenging rates ranged from about 35% for American kestrels up to 65% for chickens. The rate of complete removal ranged even wider, from roughly 13% for red-tailed hawks to 67% for northern bobwhites. Predators, in other words, get eaten less often than prey. Researchers have suggested this might be a defense against disease, since eating something that eats meat is a faster route to catching whatever killed it. You'd think someone would have flagged this a century ago. For a long time, nobody did. The pattern holds in cities too, which is where it gets uncomfortable. A study in Alberta placed bird carcasses and time-lapse cameras at 44 houses and ran 166 trials across a single year. 67.5% of the carcasses were removed. The main culprits were crows, magpies, and house cats, splitting the work almost evenly between them. Birds die against windows in enormous numbers, and the standard method of estimating that toll is to walk around buildings and count what's on the ground. If 2/3 of the evidence is gone before anyone looks, every estimate ever produced that way has been too low. It also explains why you can live in a city your whole life, surrounded by millions of birds, and never once step over a dead one. That's the part scientists actually care about here. The disappearance of bodies isn't a curiosity, it's a measurement problem sitting underneath a large share of everything we think we know about how wildlife dies. And the same problem turns up in a field where the stakes are considerably higher than bird counts. Forensic taphonomists study what happens to human remains after death because the condition of a body and the context it is found in are how investigators estimate how long someone has been dead. Scavenging wrecks that calculation. Animals pull remains apart and scatter them across wide areas. They speed up decomposition by stripping soft tissue, and they leave marks on bone that can be misread as injuries inflicted before death. The list of species involved runs longer than most people would guess. Alongside the obvious candidates like hyenas and jackals, documented scavengers of human remains include baboons, porcupines, badgers, raccoons, opossums, and deer. Deer. The animal on the calendar in your dentist's waiting room gnaws bone for the minerals locked inside it, and forensic scientists have had to learn what those marks look like so they do not get entered into evidence as signs of an attack. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. I cover nature's stranger mechanics every week. And what happens next is where the story stops being about counting. While all of this was being measured above ground, a different set of researchers were looking at what the scavengers leave behind, and the answer overturns the tidy picture most people carry around. In nature, only about 10% of a dead animal actually gets consumed by scavengers. The other 90% stays roughly where it fell and breaks down into organic matter. The crows and the foxes and the martens aren't erasing the body. They're opening it, scattering it, and moving pieces of it somewhere less exposed so they can eat in peace. The rest is handled by things you can't see. A carcass creates a small, intense, temporary ecosystem in the soil directly underneath it. Flies arrive within minutes and lay eggs in the eyes and in open wounds. The larvae that hatch churn through soft tissue at a speed that surprises people who study it for a living. Beneath them, bacteria from the animal's own gut and from the surrounding soil break down what the insects don't take, releasing a concentrated pulse of nitrogen and phosphorus into the ground. Plants growing over an old carcass site can look visibly different for years afterward, so the body doesn't vanish. It gets disassembled, redistributed, and fed back into the same landscape you're walking through. The reason you don't find bodies is that a functioning ecosystem removes them faster than you can arrive. But this stopped being an abstract question in the 1990s, and it stopped in one of the largest countries on Earth. India has an enormous cattle population and religious prohibitions that mean most cows are not eaten when they die. For centuries, that job belonged to vultures, which numbered somewhere around 50 million birds and could strip a cow to bone in under 40 minutes. Farmers didn't think of it as a service. It was simply the background condition of rural life. Then the patent expired on a cheap anti-inflammatory drug called diclofenac, and farmers across the country started using it to treat sick cattle. The drug is harmless to cows. In vultures, even a trace of it causes kidney failure. Any bird that fed on a treated carcass would usually be dead within weeks, and the population collapsed by more than 95%, falling from tens of millions to a few thousand. Two economists later treated that collapse as a natural experiment. They compared human death rates in Indian districts that had historically supported large vulture populations against districts that never had before and after the crash. In the high vulture districts, all-cause human mortality rose by more than 4% once diclofenac use took hold. Scaled nationally, their published estimate is roughly 100,000 additional human deaths per year across a 5-year window, with an associated economic cost they put near $69 billion annually. The mechanism is grim and simple. Vulture stomach acid is aggressive enough to destroy most of the pathogens in rotting meat, which means a vulture is a biological dead end for disease. Feral dogs and rats are not. When the vultures disappeared, the carcasses stayed in the open longer. Dog and rat populations climbed around the carcass dumps on the edges of towns, rabies and other infections spread, and remains ended up in water supplies. India banned veterinary diclofenac in 2006. The vultures have not meaningfully recovered. That's the kind of number that reframes an entire subject. The disappearance of dead animals is a public health service, delivered for free, by animals almost nobody was protecting. For a while, the ocean seemed to work by different rules. It doesn't, though the timescale is unrecognizable. When a large whale dies, its body eventually sinks through the water column and comes to rest on the seafloor, sometimes several kilometers down, in an environment where food is so scarce that most of what arrives is a slow drizzle of organic dust. A whale carcass landing there delivers as much organic material in one event as thousands of years of that drizzle. The scavengers arrive in waves. Sleeper sharks, hagfish, rat tailfish, crabs, and lobsters strip the soft tissue. And for a large animal, that stage alone can run for as long as 2 years. Then the bones are left bare, and something genuinely strange moves in. Osedax worms, first described from a carcass 3 kilometers deep in 2002, have no mouth and no stomach. They grow root-like tissue into the bone itself and rely on bacterial partners living inside those roots to digest what's in there. Whalebone can be more than 60% oil by weight, which makes a skeleton an enormous fat reserve. A single Osedax worm can feed on one whale's bones for as long as a decade. Entire populations can grow, reproduce, and die out on one skeleton. A single whale skeleton can support as many as 190 species across its life as a habitat. There are fewer of those habitats now than there once were. Many whale populations sit somewhere between 10 and 25% of their historical levels, which means the deep sea has quietly lost a large share of the food deliveries it evolved around. And this is the detail that changes how the whole subject reads. Those worms didn't evolve for whales. Researchers have found their traces on the bones of plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, marine reptiles that died out tens of millions of years before whales existed. Which means that for a very long stretch of Earth's history, something has been systematically eating the skeletons of large marine animals before they could ever become fossils. The fossil record has always looked thin, and paleontologists have generally blamed the odds of burial and preservation. Part of the answer is that a specialist bone consumer was quietly deleting the evidence the entire time. We're not missing those animals because they were rare. We're missing them because something ate the proof. Which brings us back to one of the oldest stories people tell about animal death. The elephant graveyard, a secret place where old elephants go to die among the bones of their ancestors, has been searched for by explorers and ivory hunters for well over a century. No one has found it, and there's no evidence that it exists. What people did find were clusters of elephant bones, and those have straightforward explanations. Old elephants wear through their final set of molars and can no longer chew tough vegetation, so they linger near water and soft plants and often die there. Droughts kill many animals around the last remaining water source. Poisoned water holes and poaching produce the same result. The bones cluster. Because the landscape concentrates the dying, and elephant skeletons are large enough to stay visible for years after everything else has been carried off. The legend survived because the alternative explanation is less satisfying than a cemetery, and because elephants really do investigate the bones of other elephants, which makes the story feel earned. The real question isn't where the bodies go, it's how a process this large stays this invisible. Tens of billions of vertebrates die every year on land, and a network of crows, foxes, martins, cats, flies, beetles, and bacteria clears almost all of it inside a week, mostly at night, mostly out of sight, and mostly for free. India found out what the bill looks like when that network stops working. The rest of us are still walking through the results and calling the silence normal. So the next time a forest feels empty of death, it's worth remembering that you're walking through the cleanest crime scene on the planet and that the cleanup crew is still working somewhere just off the trail. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you would like to continue watching more of my videos on nature's mysteries, you can click the video on the screen now.